them introduce themselves. I'll introduce myself. I'm Anna Arlotta-Guerrero, and I'm at Pitt. I've been at Pitt for 18 years, but the first 5 were coming back to school very late in life to work on my PhD. And then I was hired I always say it was the only time in my life I was at the right place at the right time. So I was hired. I'm in health and human development. And so I've been there for 18 years and mostly in teacher preparation. But the students I was working with, they get an applied developmental psychology degree. And so it's teacher preparation, of course, but they are getting this ADP degree first. So a lot of work around child development, social emotional learning, and that type of focus as well. I guess, Luca, we could look at the, do you want to do the PowerPoint?
Want me to share screen? Yeah, give me just a sec.
Thank you.
Edit in browser. All right, it might take me just a sec to load this.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So John, what I was going to talk about is so have you been to a webinar before in this batch, and you know that what we did last year?
Yes. So I first became aware, well, I think I was in a webinar that was actually about the repository.
Right.
And I was so intrigued about that. And I started emailing the professors, and
cool.
I gave them the list. And we're having a meeting actually tomorrow on this topic, on bringing more of it into the department. So they're aware of it. We went to I think it was PAC-T that they just had.
Right.
And they sat in a couple sessions there, and they said, there's more that we could do here. So I'm just a sponge right now. I'm really ready to. And some of the recording sessions that you've had in the past, I'm still looking for those because I want to pass those on to them as well.
Well, it's great that you're doing that, because I know we had a lot of colleges represented in the last year with this community of practice. And I know for me, it was interesting. Well, the whole thing has been wonderful, but it was really interesting to just sort of learn about the place where everybody is.
Yeah.
In this. And I do, my understanding is that it has rolled out this year, like officially, with K-12, but really we still have another year with, with higher ed.
Yes.
And I can share too, Luca. Is it okay?
It's okay. Sorry, I needed to get the link because when I'm sharing it full screen, I can't see the email I was trying to send to people to get them to come.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. You're good.
So the topic is very near and dear to me, and it was one that I was pursuing on my own before this came down the pike that I was aware of, and then I retired. And so then I reached out to the district where I retired from and said, hey, how's it going with this? And they said, it's so disappointing. It's been dialed back with the K-12s. The lawsuits have scared everybody.
Right.
And then I was so interested to see what our district was going to do, because there's quite a bit of diversity in central Pennsylvania in our city. And she said she was disappointed as well that some of the local districts did a half day on homelessness, and that's all they were doing, and that checked the box.
Wow. Okay.
Yikes.
Yeah, I think that's there's a whole bunch of complications with all of this, because I think that most school districts, definitely higher ed too, we've talked about a lot of these subjects for many years, but then everything in the national rhetoric has just dialed up so intensely, and then in the local areas as well. And then it's an interesting thing in teacher ed, because it's almost sometimes because I'm in Pittsburgh, so right in the city at Pitt. So sometimes, and we do send a lot of students to PPS, to Pittsburgh Public, but what we've realized is it just depends on the individual person too, because we'll ask students to go out and do some sort of a lesson that's kind of focused on equity and justice. Our students are pre-K 4, so using a piece of literature to help you through the conversation. And most students go out and have a really easy time of this, love it, the teacher loves it, everybody's happy. And then some students will come back and say, my teacher said that she just would prefer that we don't have this lesson. And
yeah.
like, oh my gosh. And these are lessons that are pretty mild.
Yeah.
With how deep you're getting into the whole discussion of what's in the competencies. Luca, we could go ahead. I think we could even go ahead past that one as well. And I did ask at the end, John, like, what would you like to discuss? So I'll just show you a little bit of what I did within this community of practice, and then you can ask and talk about whatever you would like to.
Okay.
And thank you so much for being here. It's really great.
Yes, I'm excited.
That you want to be here. Thank you. This is a pretty unique program that I was coordinating. It's a 5-year program, and they get 2 degrees and then 2 certifications. So they start freshman year, but they don't come into the school of ed until the junior year. And then when they graduate with this applied developmental psychology degree, and then they go straight on automatically into the grad year and finish with an MED in early childhood and special ed. So they have the 2 degrees, ADP, BS, and the MED, and then they have a pre-K4 gen ed and a K-12 special ed cert. So really very proud of it, very lots and lots of kind of diversified information going on. I definitely became a really big supporter of having so much child development and social emotional learning, discussion of adolescent development. It's just been, I think, very helpful for any teacher to have, especially now with all the discussion of mental health issues. And so, oh, you can go ahead, Luca. Yeah, thank you. So this program started in 2010, and so just this is an overview of how many courses they take. And I always use the term CRSE-like competencies, because we started this program in 2010, and there were already classes in it. Then I did revisions in 2015 and added classes. And then really, just these last couple of years are when the competencies came out. So we already had a lot of competencies that are similar to those in the formal, actually mandated competencies. However, tweak things along the way because we weren't always using the exact same terminology. So before they come to us, they take a social foundations of education. Then already in the applied developmental psychology program is a course called developmental cultural distinctions, which is a really cool course where we hit so many different big idea topics, like just the overviewing of discussions about race, gender, religion, socioeconomic status, ability level. So all of these, because this is sort of that intro into the rest of the classes that are going to come. And then they also do a community engagement course. And so they go out, they have a field experience in the community. We have a lot of conversation about, because, a lot of kids come in with a lot of service learning hours that they did because a lot of places had to do it for National Honor Society and things like that. Well, we talk a lot about the difference between going out into a community to serve, which is obviously great, but the difference between that and actually engaging in a two-way street within a community. I'm not going to come in and tell you what to do because this is your community. I'm here to support, and I want you to learn. I want to learn from you as well. Big conversations about that. Pitt is obviously in an urban setting, but we, have people from all over the country. And we have tons and tons of kids who are, middle class, white, mostly female, who maybe had a friend here and there growing up that they were a person of color. or maybe a different religion than them, a different gender, but really not a whole lot of like personal experience a lot of times. So it's very interesting because you have to meet people where they are. In 2015, I did revisions, and then I added 2 classes. The one I'm talking about today is called Teaching Globally and Locally in a Diverse World. And then we also added this other class that my friend teaches called Attentional Teaching Practices. And that focuses on a lot on the integration and the intersection of social emotional learning, mindfulness with equity and justice, and figuring, like, thinking about that in that intersection. You can change. Thanks, Luca. So just I had to ask myself questions, of course, on okay, I chose this class. Why this one? They already take 3 classes before they take this class. And so by that point, all of these students have been all together in a cohort. They've had sort of an overview conversation on many, many topics, and not just me talking, of course. The assignments, the first thing they do straight away is an identity assignment, talking about their own identities. We talk about who gets to choose your identity for you, because it should just be us, but a lot of times it's somebody else thinking they know our identities. So we really get deep into very, like, I'll use the word deep again, deep conversations as they get to know each other. And it's a little lighter and a little overview in those first 2 classes. But once you get to this class, now we're taking a lot of what we've just dug deep into and going deeper. And with an expectation that you're going to participate in conversation. And sometimes they do more of participating in smaller groups. Mm-hmm. But what I've seen over the years is, as the classes go on and they get more familiar with each other and they feel that they can say more and they've learned a lot, as it goes on, they really start to talk more and more and more. And then I'll see students who sometimes don't say things in class, but then in an assignment, they'll write something and it's like, whoa, yeah. why aren't you bringing this up? Yeah. And it's amazing to me I know I went through this years ago. We all do probably. When you're feeling comfortable to say something you want to say and not feel like, okay, is this controversial, or
mm-hmm. Am I going to hurt people's feelings? And
right. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I think, and that was the key to so much. Lucas heard me talk about this for a year now, but I just feel that I was so lucky to have the cohort model, because you have to know each other. And like I've seen in our community of practice, from almost a year and a half ago to now, you just know, one, that's just more open. You just feel more comfortable. You feel like, oh, okay, I can say that because we have our boundaries, we have our norms and our, thoughts about how we are running these meetings, which is the same as what we do in our classes. And so it's been a good way to do this. So I thought about this class because of where it fell in the program, knowing that the next year they would take the attentional teaching practices and then also be out in the field. Let's see, I was talking, thinking about like, how does it prepare students to go into the field? Because all of our students, for their whole senior year, they have 2 practicum experiences. They're all in Pittsburgh Public. So it was an intentional, purposeful decision that everyone would be in Pittsburgh Public, at least for 1 or 2 of their placements. When they go to grad school, they can tell us if they want to, they can list my first, second, third choice. They could say urban, suburban, or we have a lab school called Falk. So they get to choose. And most times everybody gets to go where they want. I have had students who have done all 4 placements in PPS because they know that they want to work in an urban setting and they want just as much experience as they can get. Also, I've questioned, too, like, okay, well, is what I'm doing in this class, could that be done in K-12? And I do think it can, especially in high school, like in some high school classes. Okay, thanks, Luca. This is a lot of writing on here, but what I did was I had objectives, of course, but when I was looking back on my class and how I was going to revise my class and why I chose this one for our community of practice, I had to look at all of the objectives that I had already written. And then what I did was I just aligned, I literally took objectives from the competencies and said, here's what we're doing in this class, and use the competencies as my objectives. I think that we here and there touch on more than these, but you can't have like 50 objectives. Well, I guess you can, I don't know. But the big objectives that I took from the CRSE competencies that I wanted to use in this class, I just, you can obviously see this later, but just like highlighting each one, the identifying the literature and professional learning opportunities, because they were, the next year, the next term, really, they were going to go into their placements. But then thinking about the literature, like literally, I think everything is just so intentional and literal. Like, okay, who are the authors? Let's think of another class that you've had. Were they all white authors? Were they all straight authors? Were they all, a certain religion? I mean, sometimes we don't know that, but really thinking about who are we reading? Who are we learning from? Who are the knowers, that we're learning from? And then another objective was recognizing the history of inequities and institutional biases. I think I have this somewhere else, but I use this book that a friend of mine advised me to use. And I had been using this book about the history of American education by an author called Joel Spring. But this book, and he is white, this book I love this book. It's called The Deculturalization of Education in the United States. I know it's deculturalization, but he has these chapters. So there's a chapter on African American students. There's a chapter on Asian American students, Native American students, and Latino Hispanic American students. And so I just loved that he did a chapter on each of those groups, because it was just straightforward as to here is some of the history of each one of these groups. And a lot of students knew a lot about African American history in education, but not that much about the Native Americans, Asian Americans, and the Latinos. And that was really important to me to emphasize. And as the years have gone on, I've emphasized that more and more and more in my classes, because they're going to go out and teach everyone. And there are tons and tons of people from many countries, from many backgrounds, religions, genders, socioeconomic levels, and we have to kind of be broad with that. And so great book.
I was trying to write, I'm taking some notes so that I'm paying attention. The deculturalization, who did you say the author was?
His name's Joel Spring. It's called Deculturalization and the Struggle for Equality.
Okay.
And then he says, a brief history of the education of dominated cultures in the United States. And it was, over the years, I've taught this class for like 7 years, I think. And it has been interesting to me every single year to ask, like, did students know about what were called Indian schools? Did they know about the Japanese internment camps? It's like there were so many things, like the push of trying to not allow Chinese Americans into schools. And I mean, one of the biggest cases, the landmark case that brought around bilingual education and ESL education is Lau versus Nichols, which was a Chinese American family out in, I think, San Francisco. I know California. But was just so much. And then students did enlighten me and say, well, if you took AP history or AP Gov, you did get a lot of this, but if you didn't, then it was just never talked about in school. And so it was a big thing, and this book just really helped me walk through a lot of the history. And then, talking about, we think about how we connect to local and global communities, because what I do is I start in this class with talking about Pittsburgh, more specifically, in Western Pennsylvania. Pittsburgh it used to be number 1. Now we're number 3 in we are the whitest, number 3 now, metropolitan statistical area in the country.
No kidding.
Yes, and it was number 1, and I just checked like over the last month or so, and it's number 3 now, and it's so fun to watch these students, because I'll have the students who come from, little towns in certain spaces in Pennsylvania or other states where it was mostly all white.
Yeah.
So they come in and they'll say, oh my gosh, this is the most racially diverse place I've ever been. And then the kids are like you're from California, right, Luca?
Yep.
Like the kids who are from California or DC or some other, New York City or whatever, and they kind of like look at me like, are they kidding? Like, are they kidding? Like, they think this place is diverse racially. And then it's interesting because even sometimes people in Pittsburgh will say, well, Pittsburgh is just black and white. And it's like, no, it's not. It is not just black and white. And nor is Pennsylvania just black and white. And it's like, so there's so much learning going on from each other, which is really, really exciting for me to watch over the growth, and then that goes into the next, like challenging their own beliefs and attitudes. Like I've had a lot of kids that I call them kids, and then they look at me and frown, but a lot of students, I'll have a lot of students who have come to me over the years in a very respectful way, but say, I'm the only white person in this classroom, or I'm just like I have a student right now who's teaching at a charter school downtown where her and the principal are the only white people in the whole building. And what's really cool is to watch them feel nervous, maybe, or even sometimes scared, or have had a parent say, I don't know about you teaching there, to then go for 4 months later and say, oh my gosh, this was like the best experience of my life, And so I've had a lot of kids that grew up in, everybody has different things going on in their lives that you don't know about, but, primarily white school districts, and then go and teach in Chicago, teach in New York, teach in LA. I have a kid who was like a charter school leader in Compton out in LA, and so it's amazing to see where they come and then where they go and how much they've learned. We can change, Luca, thank you. So I'll just talk about this, and then you could talk about some of the classes that you've seen where you are, John. These are the assignments that I have in this class. And I did revise, during our COP last year. So I always did this TED Talk every year, and I'll talk a little bit about that. But I just added, because I was teaching this class as I was working on it, which was really interesting. And I had a chairperson once talk about what she called a living syllabus that we've kind of floored with students sometimes to say, okay, I can like stop midway through this class and add something, or you can ask me to add something, or whatever way we want to do that. So I did add this reflection on Baldwin's Talk to Teachers. However, last year, although I added it, I did it at the end of the class, like the last assignment, because I was thinking in my head, okay, well, they've had these other 3 classes before this one. Are they really ready to deeply reflect on Baldwin's Talk to Teachers or not? And I was thinking, well, maybe they're not ready. And then after doing the community of practice, I thought I really have to, I want to move this up to be the first assignment instead of the last assignment, because I figured it would give me an opportunity to read these reflections and see where people are. And we all know, like, some students are going to write what they think you want to hear. But a lot of them usually get pretty honest, because I do feel like they trust me. And I mean, you say what you think, and so they've been pretty honest.
So to find that, would I be able to just get on YouTube and Google and search something like Baldwin's Talk to Teachers? Is that
Yeah, it's a document. I'm not sure if there's an actual video of him. It's actually a document. It's a piece of writing, and he actually calls it his Talk to Teachers.
Okay.
And it's a pretty long piece of writing. But yeah, it's a really great document. It's a great.
Do you happen to know, Anna, if that's linked in your syllabus directly?
It is. It is in the syllabus. Yeah.
Because John, I put in the chat link to Anna's page on the CRSE repository website where you can find the syllabus document. So that would include more kind of robust descriptions and like descriptions of the reading materials, and sounds like even some of the direct links to them, if that's helpful for you.
Yeah, that is.
Syllabus, there's a link to all of our readings.
Okay.
Yep. And mostly readings, but a lot of TED Talks and videos and things like that as well. Yeah. And when I started this class, I don't know why I thought to do this, but I just said, I'm going to have them do a TED Talk simulation. And so I taught the class for a while before 2020, but in 2020, we were about halfway through class when we shut down. So everybody before that time did their TED Talk in person, and everybody after had to do it on video. And so the next year, when we were all on Zoom, I said, okay, we're going to do the TED Talks, but you have to do a video. And I was so impressed with the videos that I just kept it as a video, because they were just more authentic. And I mean, you're always going to have a student here or there that are shy to talk in front of a group, but most aren't. But even the ones who are, boisterous, they were so authentic in these videos. And then they write a paper that goes along with the video. And then what they have to do, what I started doing in 21 was I would put them into groups, and they didn't get to choose their group. I usually have them choose groups, but this time in this kind of thing, I chose the groups. So I put together like 5 people who then, and not based on not based on what they were talking about, just 5 random people. And then they had to watch everybody else's video. And then they came together on a Zoom call that they recorded that had all 5 of them there, talking to each other. Like everybody had to go around and tell somebody a positive comment about their video, and then they had to ask a question about what they were talking about. So these TED Talks, now, because of the competencies being out, I will have them choose something that is a competency and then do a TED Talk based on that topic, so shall we say. And then what else I added was this lesson plan. Like, they're going to go to student teach next term to a practicum. So now they have to do a lesson plan, a written lesson plan using competencies. Not all of them, of course, but I'm still working on in my mind going, do I tell them specific competencies or a specific area, or say choose 5 or something like that? Because I'm also at the same time, I mean, as a principal and teacher, like when they look at standards, it's like, okay, you don't just teach one standard in isolation. It's like
Yeah.
you bring a whole bunch of them together.
Yeah.
And so it's the same with these competencies. Do you have any questions about those assignments?
No, but I really like those ideas.
Thank you.
Like I said, I'm really absorbing today.
Thank you. We love it. Okay, thanks, Luca. Well, this is just talking about I do, and Luca has probably heard me say this at most meetings. It's like I always say, I was very fortunate to work in this cohort model, because I often meet kids that are in the freshman year of college because they're thinking about coming into the program. So by the time they're in senior year, even, I've known most of them for 3 to 4 years, and then they go into grad year. So I feel very fortunate about that, because it has been what I think has helped the growth, because they know each other. It's amazing the comments I've heard along the way after their student teaching experiences, and just being very honest about their biases, and
Mm-hmm.
saying what some of their biases were honestly, and saying, oh my gosh, I was like so far off on this. I think one of the funniest things that I love is I hear students sometimes. I just saw one the other day, where a former student, where she told me there was one class where they were reading Ibram Kendi's How to Be an Anti-Racist book. And she goes, yeah, I came back from spring break and I left that on the kitchen counter and just said, Mom, Dad, read this book. And then I had another student say, yeah, I think she was watching 13th for like some other class. And she's like, my mom and dad walked by and I said, get in here. You need to watch this show with me, because so it's cool that they are passing it back to
Oh yeah.
older people in their lives. Because I feel like one of the things I've noticed every single year is, like, we get really deep into conversations and you'll see some kids' faces, and some actually articulate like, oh, okay. Some of the things I've heard my grandparents say, or
Mm-hmm.
even parents, or I had a student once write, it took me until I was 20 years old to realize that when I was in preschool, my parents were telling me not to play with certain kids, and I didn't realize I was a kid.
Mm-hmm.
And now I look back and go, oh my gosh, it
Mm-hmm.
was because they were Black and brown.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a hard thing to come to grips with
Mm-hmm.
when you're thinking of your family. But they're pretty cool in that they go home and talk about it, and which is really great. And
And their awareness is going to hopefully stop that from being passed forward, and that
exactly
impacts everybody.
right.
That's how I see the big picture.
And like from your experience, I know I should have told you this in the beginning. I taught grade school for 15 years. I was a bilingual teacher in Dallas. I'm from Pittsburgh, but I was living in Dallas and went back to school there, and I was a bilingual teacher there. So I've worked with all Spanish speaking students. And like, I know we had some trainings in our, this is going back into like, mid 90s, but talking about like that bystander thing, like when you hear another teacher say something, how should you approach them, and respectfully and professionally say, you should reflect on what I just heard you say to a student,
Mm-hmm.
because it is helping each other. And at first, people don't want to hear, a lot of people don't think they have biases, but once it starts to get talked about, we all have biases,
Oh,
which is,
yeah.
everybody does. And so
Mm-hmm.
really with teachers helping each other to, you know, discuss it and not trying to make someone feel bad or guilty or anything, just having that conversation.
They typically they get defense. I mean, when I
Yeah.
would deal with large groups of teachers, the first thing would be the defensive wall goes up.
Oh yeah,
And
definitely.
I had put out articles to faculty, and or I gave them to principals to share with faculty, and some principals ran with it, and some principals went, I will not do that. I will
Wow.
not give that to them. I don't want to do that. It starts up conversations that I don't know how to
Wow.
handle.
Huh. That's interesting.
You don't have to have all the answers.
Right. You know what? I had a principal, one of my first principals who, and back then she printed the articles and would put them in our mailboxes.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't remember that, Luca. Yeah. But
I
but
did that too.
yeah, and
Yeah.
it was so great. Like
Yeah.
it was so wonderful and she would do it specifically, like, oh, I think she's interested in this or he's
Yeah.
interested in that. And she'd give us these articles. And I mean, I think that I don't think enough about how that probably made me want to go get a PhD,
Wow, that's
because
so
she just
awesome.
had all of this extra learning information for us all the time, which was really cool.
Just that reading is just that what teachers need to always be doing. It's
Yes,
simpler professional development.
yes.
And it actually could be individualized like that when you are handing out articles separately too. Not everybody has to get the same article.
Right. And that's what she would do. It was so
That's
cool.
clever. Yeah.
Yeah, it really is. And yeah, I'm gonna just show this and then we could stop sharing. Or I just was gonna draw this to your attention. Talking about like the cultural competence and the building of the relationships. I've kind of already talked about that a little bit, but in the child development classes and in the culture class, a couple other ones, we always talk about this Bronfenbrenner's ecological systems, because like thinking about, and I use something called a diversity wheel, where we think about like, here's me and here's my family, and what's getting bigger and bigger and bigger around me in my community, and having an influence on me. And like, I know when we use the diversity wheel, this was like maybe 2 falls ago. I had this big class of 45 kids. And I must say, I was in that class, there were 8 students who were first gen Americans. And then all together, there was probably 25% of them that were um, BIPOC students. And it was so interesting because we talked about this diversity wheel, and they'd get in the small groups and have conversations and everything. And I remember a student, when sharing back, said, well, wow, like, I'm white. I never wake up in the morning and think about my race. I've never thought about that. And,
Mm-hmm.
and to hear that somebody else is saying, well, yeah, I wake up in the morning and think about my race or my gender or my religion. We had a couple of students that wore hijabs that said, I put this on every morning and it's like defines me, and shows the world who I am. And I have to think about it all the time. And so it was a very interesting. But just the way we do this is, every class builds on itself, on the one before it. Every class builds on the next one and gets deeper and deeper in the conversations. And then in the senior year, they do this attentional teaching practice class while they're out at practicum. And that then pulls in all of that social emotional wellness piece, the behavioral wellness piece, mindfulness and justice and equity, and then just scaffolding for them, because there's just students who just never thought about any of this ever, like,
Mm-hmm.
just never thought about it. And it's big thing to get started. Is that the last one, Luca? Oh yeah.